Alright, this is the second Traditionalism Modernism video. This is now changing attitudes and also women. This is a big deal in the 1920s, and we'll get there and see how that works in a second. First off, there had always existed in this country a cult of domesticity. Now, if something is domesticated, that means it is in the house. You have a domesticated pet. That means you have a dog, a cat, whatever. Okay? So if we say someone is domesticated, it generally means that they are married and they have this idea that of what a family is, etc. Now, domesticated women meant that they stayed in the home. They did not work much. Okay, in fact, there was actually a ladies' book. We also have the rise of etiquette and the way things are supposed to be done. A lot in the South is really based on that. Okay, so this is the traditional view. Women got married, had children, stayed in the home, took care of said children, took care of the home. That is the traditional view. It really changes here with this new generation in the 1920s. Now, also in the 1920s, we have a baby boom. Following World War I and later World War II, which is a much bigger one, we have a rise in the birth rate. Now, this is due to a couple of situations, but this also kind of prompts a lot of things to happen in the 1920s, and we'll see about that. There was a horrible influenza break, a flu outbreak in the 1920s. It killed millions of people, but still there's a lot of people being born, baby boom. Now, one last thing about the kind of traditional thing about women, they're not supposed to work outside the home. However, Warren G. Harding will sign what is called the Shepherd-Towner Act in 1921. This allowed states to create maternity and pediatric clinics, and it also kind of just gave the idea that we want to protect those children that are being born in the baby boom, and for the first time we have that going on. You didn't have to go to a regular doctor. They could go to a pediatric doctor. Now, the 1920s generation really flips the script here, and it starts with a new morality. Now, new morality, and you can see by the thing depicted here, the lady with the red hair and the man on the far are actually married, and yet they are having what appears to be an affair. And so the concept of marriage and the concept of loyalty and respect with one partner, with one woman, one male, is going to be completely challenged here in the 1920s. Now, the women of the 1920s were called flappers. Now, the lifestyle of flappers, they were partying parties. They drank and they smoked in public, which was a complete thing. They went out dancing a lot, which was seen as kind of frivolous and kind of risque. They were allowed to take part in more sports. They were allowed to drive, and they were morally kind of sexually liberated, going back to those new morals. Now, some defining aspects that's not seen, maybe you can see there, is the bob haircut. In fact, F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote a short story called Bernice Bobs Her Hair, and that Bernice is actually having a conflict with her mother, and that really shows traditionalism versus modernism. These new women wanted to cut their hair and be completely different, be kind of free-spirited, and their parents and their mothers did not like this, and they said that they were kind of downgrading society. Now, the flappers also are going to be big in the anti-prohibition movement. They were actually called crusaders, and they wanted to repeal or take back the 18th Amendment. They felt that alcohol should still be legal, and they could go and have a good time, and who were you to tell them what they can and cannot do? Now, to enforce prohibition under the 18th Amendment, Congress will pass the Volstead Act. Now, this gave federal police powers in enforcing prohibition. They can go into a bar and dump it out. But it actually had a negative effect. If you can actually see there, when the Volstead Act is passed, we actually have a very high rate in arrest. Well, this is the whole purpose, if you remember, about prohibition was they were going into jail and they were committing crimes. Yet, as you kind of took away alcohol, the crime rate increased. Now, why did that actually happen? Just because you make something illegal does not mean people are going to stop doing it. Okay? So we actually had a group of people who provided these alcoholic services even though it was illegal. And they were called bootleggers. Now here's the modern idea of a bootleg. We have two cars, a scout car and then two other cars. Now the scout car would go and look for the cops, and you would only put the alcohol in one car. The other car was basically the dummy car. So if the scout car radioed back and said, hey, there's somebody up the road there, the dummy car would act erratically to get the police to follow them, while the other guy goes on. It's kind of like a bootleg playing football. You fake a handoff, everyone's bought into the running back, and you're going to try to throw it deep down the field to the open receiver. Hopefully, he's got a one-on-one advantage and he can get open. Okay. Now, bootleggers are also the rise of organized crime, the mafia, things like that. And the most infamous bootlegger of all was Al Capone, Scarface. And so this is kind of where he made his money. There's a really good show on maybe Showtime or HBO, I can't remember, called Boardwalk Empire. And it's about the Prohibition era and the rise of organized crime and how much money is to be made off these bootlegging operations. Now, along those ways as well, there had to be special bars in secret. They called them speakeasies. Generally, they had a code word to get in, and this is also kind of the rise of the jazz age. Jazz was kind of the new music. In fact, when they redid The Great Gatsby, Jay-Z did the music to that, did a lot of music on the soundtrack there, and they put a lot of rap in there, and some people were upset about it, but I think I get it in the fact that jazz was the rap of its time. It was completely against the grain. It was not seen as okay, and it was seen as kind of morally wrong. Alright, and so that is our second video about traditionalism versus modernism.